When people think about the richest individuals in Star Wars, I'd most immediately picture Palpatine, Queen Amidala, or maybe the noble houses. And honestly, that sounds reasonable at first, but this is where things get interesting. Because before Order 66, before the Empire, before Palpatine openly controlled the galaxy, the balance of power looked completely different. And the crazy part? The richest beings in the Republic were often not the loudest, not the ones with the biggest armies, not the ones with the strongest fleets, not the ones with the flashiest presence. They were the ones who could fund wars, influence senators, control entire star systems economically without ordinary citizens even realizing how powerful they truly were. And the higher you climb on this list, the more uncomfortable the truth becomes. In Star Wars, wealth doesn't mean luxury, it means control. Because eventually, money stops buying villas or starships, it starts buying governments, wars, and entire galaxies. Rank 5, Newt Gunray. Most people completely underestimate Newt Gunray because he seems nervous, constantly afraid, and usually like Palpatine's puppet. But that hides how unbelievably powerful he actually was. Gunray was born on Nymoedia, not into wealth, not in a mansion, but in a communal hive. Nymoedian children spend their first 7 years as larvae in a shared brood chamber, intentionally underfed, so the weak die and the most aggressive survive. Gunray was one of the most successful hoarders of his generation. No pity, no shame, only instinct. Sidious later said about him, his greed isn't a character flaw, it was bred into him. He began as a simple trade officer and climbed his way to the top of the Trade Federation through betrayal and ruthless strategy. A self-made viceroy, from larva pit to galactic power, because Gunray was the viceroy of the Trade Federation, and the Trade Federation wasn't just a company. It controlled trade routes, blockades, transport networks, droid factories, and massive amounts of galactic capital. Basically, imagine Amazon. If Amazon suddenly had its own army and could blockade entire planets because it didn't like their tax policy. And that's exactly what happens on Naboo. The Trade Federation has enough economic power to launch a full-scale invasion, not as a nation, as a corporation. And that's the moment the Republic begins to crack. Because when corporations become powerful enough to wage their own wars, democracy is usually already in trouble. Gunray himself wasn't the smartest man in the galaxy, but he stood at the top of a system that moved unimaginable sums of money. And that made him extremely valuable to Sidious. Rank 4, Jabba the Hutt. At first glance, Jabba looks like a fat gangster with questionable hygiene, but that massively underestimates him. Jabba was born the son of Hutt clan leader Zorba the Hutt. Hutts are naturally long-lived, resilient, and power-hungry. But wealth among Hutts isn't inherited easily, it's conquered. Jabba began his criminal career young and spent centuries building an empire that outlasted every rival. By the time of the Clone Wars, he is over 600 years old, 6 centuries of crime. If you don't pay, you become wall decor in carbonite. If you talk too much, you end up in the Sarlacc. If you bring too little, you get thrown to your death, not inherited, built with a patience only possible when you have multiple human lifetimes to work with. Because Jabba didn't just control Tatooine. Tatooine was almost worthless. Jabba became rich because he controlled what passed through worthless places. Smuggling, spice trade, bounties, weapons, debt, the entire criminal ecosystem of the Outer Rim eventually flowed through the Hutts, and that made Jabba more dangerous than many politicians. While the Republic debated laws, Jabba already controlled how goods, information, and money actually moved through the galaxy. And the impressive part, Jabba rarely had to fight himself. People worked for him because they owed him, they feared him, or they needed money. Han Solo gets into trouble for exactly this reason. Not because Jabba is emotional, but because criminal empires only function when no one believes they can ignore their debts. Jabba wasn't a king. He was an economic shadow network with a slug's body. Rank 3, Count Dooku. Dooku is where wealth becomes politically dangerous because Dooku wasn't just a Sith. He was an aristocrat born into House Sereno, one of the oldest noble dynasties in the galaxy, but raised in the Jedi Temple. That's the paradox of Dooku. He was born rich and immediately given away. The Jedi took him as a child. His title, inheritance, and family were inaccessible as long as he remained in the Order. When he left the Order, he claimed his inheritance, decades as a penniless Jedi, then suddenly one of the richest men in the galaxy. That moment changed him, not because money corrupted him, but because he finally understood what the Order had deliberately kept from him. Sereno was one of the wealthiest worlds in the Republic, and that made him invaluable to Sidious. Because Dooku brought something Palpatine didn't yet fully possess: old money, status, influence, prestige. If Jabba looks like a gangster, Dooku looks like someone you invite to a state banquet, and that makes him far more dangerous. Dooku could influence senators, persuade systems, manipulate elites, and lead the separatists at the same time. He funded political movements, military projects, and entire droid armies. While the Republic believed they were watching a political conflict, a Sith Lord with aristocratic billions was already orchestrating the chaos. Why is he still below Sand Hill? Because Dooku had private wealth and access to the banking clan, but Sand Hill wasn't his tool. Dooku was Sand Hill's client. That's a crucial difference. Rank 2, Sand Hill. Sand Hill looks incredibly boring, and that's exactly why almost everyone underestimates him. Sand Hill is a moon, a species from Moonalensed, and moons are not wealthy by accident. Finance isn't a career for them, it's culture. Moons learn economic systems as children the way others learn to read. Sand Hill rose through this system to the absolute top, not through luck, through an understanding of money that impressed even other financiers. He wears no armor, no lightsaber, no imposing uniform. He usually just sits there and talks about loans. The problem? Sand Hill controlled the intergalactic banking clan, which means he controlled how the war was paid for. This is the kind of power people overlook. While Jedi became generals and clones died on battlefields, Sand Hill decided who could keep fighting. He financed fleets, weapons, factories, loans, and massive war production, and the disturbing part, he profited from the war continuing. Sand Hill didn't need to threaten anyone, he just had to sign contracts. And suddenly both the Republic and the Separatists could continue fighting. This is the moment Star Wars becomes uncomfortably realistic, because real power often doesn't look like Darth Vader. It looks like a banker deciding who gets money. Rank 1, Higo Damask. You've probably never heard this name. Higo Damask, also a moon. Same species as Sand Hill, same planet, but a completely different scale. Higo Damask was born into a moon merchant family. Comfortably wealthy, well-connected, not influential. He could have become a successful financier. Instead, he was discovered by a Sith master and trained as Darth Plagueis. And from that combination came something unique. A Sith who didn't want to conquer, he wanted to buy. He spent decades building Damask Holdings, company by company, network by network, never flashy, never loud, always efficient, one of the most powerful financiers of the entire Old Republic. Outwardly, a businessman, an investor, a philanthropist, respected in the Senate's highest circles. In reality, Darth Plagueis. And this is why he ranks number 1. Plagueis understood something most Sith never did. If you want to control a galaxy, you control its economic system first. Damask Holdings wasn't a normal company. It was a smokescreen for the largest financial empire ever built by a single individual. Plagueis invested in systems that would later decide the war. He funded political careers, including one very famous one from Naboo. He paid for the clone army. He influenced the Trade Federation. The entire infrastructure of the Sith plan ran through his wealth. Sand Hill controlled the galaxy's bank. Plagueis controlled Sand Hill's world. He met senators as a philanthropist. He met Jedi as a concerned citizen. He met his apprentice as a master. And no one, absolutely no one, connected all these roles to one name. That's why Plagueis is number one. Not because of the size of his fortune, but because of the invisibility with which he used it. Jabba had 8 billion credits, and everyone knew it. Plagueis had a fraction of that publicly and controlled Jabba's world with it. He died before the Clone Wars began, murdered by his own apprentice in his sleep, and his entire fortune, his entire network, his entire infrastructure passed to Sheev Palpatine, who then became Chancellor and then Emperor. Higo Damask didn't lose. He trusted the wrong person, Fazit. What connects these 5 beings? None of them wield a lightsaber. None of them were democratically elected. And none of them earned their wealth by helping the galaxy. They accumulated it by understanding how systems work and then controlling those systems. The Jedi kept peace for 1,000 generations, but while they meditated, 5 beings in their shadow built the galaxy's economic architecture. And maybe that's the real lesson. The Empire didn't rise because the Sith were stronger than the Jedi. It rose because the galaxy spent centuries giving its money to the wrong people. And the right one knew exactly when to collect.